I just finished doing my first ever European mount by myself. This is my South Dakota whitetail buck that I harvested a couple of weeks ago. I just got back from my Nebraska deer hunt, and the Lord blessed me with this beautiful 3x3 Nebraska mule deer. So let's get started. Let's light the base camp angle iron stove, a metal bucket filled with warm water, and I've just done basic skull prep here. I skinned the head, so the skin is ripped off. I cut the eyeballs out, and I disjointed the bottom jaw. So we're only talking skull with the top set of teeth. You want to add dish soap. Any brand that degreases is what you're looking for. Just submerge the skull to where the water line meets the bottom of the antler. I need to run some errands to get ready for Thanksgiving tomorrow, but you just want to make sure that you keep that water level even with the bottom of the antlers. And we're going to let this simmer on a low boil. We'll check back with you in a couple hours. It's been probably a good 3.5 hours or so. My errands took longer than I expected. Let's go ahead and remove the head from the water. Turn off my propane for now. The smell of the skull and the flesh boiling in the water reminds me of my childhood. My mother used to buy soup bones from the local butcher and boil them down, and it really reminds me of that smell. You definitely want to have a wire brush. I picked this up for $1 at Dollar Tree. A couple different size needle nose pliers and a good knife like this Outdoor Edge caper. Now it's just the timely process of manual labor. I'm going to reach in with these pliers, start pulling out pieces of eye membranes. You can do this however you want. You just need to remove all the flesh, all the fat, all that junk, look at this, from the skull. Get your knife in there, dig around, cut that free, and it's just going to be a very tedious process. The wire brush also comes in handy for scraping off all of that residue. If you have any vertebrae still attached to the base of the skull, you should be able to remove those. Once you get down around the nose area here, you can reach in and start to pick out all these pieces of fat and sinew. There's also a really soft piece right there that you're going to want to pick away from the skull. Use your pliers or your knife to get in there. And we don't need to worry as much about shattering the skull if we're careful, because we're not using bleach. And so water and dish soap are not going to make the skull brittle. Just be careful around the thinner parts of the skull. One taxidermist who boiled one of my skulls left all the little sinus cavities up in the nose, but I pull those out. Just use a long pair of pliers. And be careful again, you don't want to hurt the skull, but as you boil, you can start to pull that stuff out of there. And I definitely recommend the longest pair of needle nose pliers you can buy. I bought these at Harbor Freight for probably $3. I'm about to remove a huge piece of cartilage, the one that runs right down the center. So just reach in there and rip it out. There's a super huge piece that I just pulled out. After 10 or 15 minutes of very slow and tedious work, you can see that I've opened up that huge cavity. There's still a lot of work to be done on the skull. I really like the caper knife because it's so small, you can rest your thumb on the blade and use it to dig out and pick out chunks of meat and fat. You can see my scrap pile's getting huge. I don't have a dog, but I suppose if you had a dog, they'd go crazy with this stuff. Just be really careful as you're doing this. You want to make sure that you protect that area around the eye socket, the part that connects the eye socket to the skull, and also these little areas right here. I don't know if those are sinus passages there. You don't want to break that out right there. You just want to get everything out of that main cavity. So after the initial boiling and a good 20 or 25 minutes of serious handwork, this is what I'm left with. A new bucket of hot water on the angle iron stove, some more dish soap, and put the skull back into the water. You can see just how clean that first boil and picking session made the skull. All right, it's been another hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. Remove the skull, and I'll bring it over here to my little skull cleaning area on the back sidewalk. I'm gonna immediately start brushing off all this fat, and you should see a dramatic difference between the first and the second boil. This gives new meaning to the term brushing your teeth. You'll notice a hole on the back top center of the skull. Call that the brain hole. So that's where the Native Americans would reach in and pull out the brain that they would boil down for help in tanning the hide. This is where all the pros, the taxidermists, use a power washer, but I'm not a pro or a taxidermist, and I don't own a power washer, so I'm just going to use a hose to start spraying out the cavity. Make sure you stick your hose or your power washer inside that brain hole. This is also a great time to get your pliers out again, reach down inside those openings and pull out yet more cartilage. Get inside that brain hole and do whatever you can to break the remaining pieces of brain tissue and connective brain tissue free. Eventually, you're going to be able to reach in there. This is what the skull looks like after the day's work. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. We have a lot of family coming over. So if I don't get back to this tomorrow, I'll get back to this in another day or two, and then we'll move on to the whitening process. It's the day after Thanksgiving, and the skull is completely dry after the boiling sessions. You should be able to take your pliers, reach them down into this little ear canal section, and completely remove that section of the ear canal. Then you can get in there with your knife or your pick and remove the rest of the meat. When the skull dries after boiling, all the little meat sections will turn dark there, and it's really easy to distinguish them from the skull. So you can take a knife or a pick and just start to scrape all that brown stuff. This is also when you want to use your pick or your knife, get inside that brain hole here, get in there, dig around, remove any remaining pieces of now dried fat or connective tissue, and take your wire brush from earlier and do a little finishing touch. The skull should look extremely clean, just about like this. And now the most fun part that we've been waiting for. Time to whiten the skull. We won't be using bleach or regular hydrogen peroxide. There are pros and cons to all those methods. Like I stated earlier in the video, I'm not a taxidermist. I'm just a guy who figured out a great way to do this. I went to Sally Beauty Supply, picked up the Clairol Professional BW2 powder lightener, along with the Salon Care Professional 40 volume stabilized formula cream developer. Open up your powder whitener. There's a measuring scoop. I watched lots of videos online and they had recipes for how many scoops to use, but I found that you do not need to do this. You want to use plenty of this stuff, along with enough cream developer to mix up a creamy sauce a little bit like that. This isn't nearly as important as when you're doing the bleach method, but you could go ahead and tape up the base of the antler if you want to. Now we're ready to start painting the skull. Any remaining pieces of fat or tissue that you have are going to be small. We're talking pinhead size, the size of a little droplet of water. You don't need to worry about it. They're dry, and everything we're going to do in this process is going to make them more dry. They're going to flake off, or they're going to be completely sealed. You're not going to have to worry about any types of contamination, anything to attract a bug. Paintbrush into the cream and start painting. Use a lot of product and make sure you really get inside those eye sockets, these nasal cavities, sinus cavities. Make sure that everything is coated inside and out, along with the bottom of the skull. I suppose some people might want to leave their teeth natural. You're welcome to do that. But this method is going to get your teeth a lot more white than with the bleach method. Use your brush, get on up there inside that nasal cavity. Make sure that you get everything except antler completely coated in the whitening cream. Then I recommend tying a string around your antler and suspending it from a tree limb. Let the skull hang in the tree for the rest of the day. When it gets dark, we'll come back and we'll see what we have. I'd also recommend wearing rubber gloves. My fingers are starting to burn a little bit. I didn't want to wear gloves because I'm dealing with camera buttons, so I'm having to take them on and off, so I'm gonna go wash my hands right now. It's been about 5 or 6 hours. The sun is starting to go down, so I'm gonna cut the skull down from the tree. You can use a rag to wipe it off, a brush, but since this is the first coat and I have so much product on there, I'm going to use a hose to rinse off the cream. Make sure to get down inside that brain hole again. You can see the teeth have already gone from brown to rather clean. No particular hurry here, and I have a huge weekend ahead of me. So I'm just going to put this in the kitchen. We're going to let it dry overnight. Come back tomorrow, I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll go ahead, use the cream one more time to touch up the areas that aren't as white as I want it to be. If you take a look at this, you'll see it's perfectly acceptable to hang the skull as is. It looks beautiful, and this looks just like the skulls look when you get them back from some taxidermists. However, since I have ample time, I'm going to go ahead and add one more coat of whitener. It's going to be a nice warm 55-degree day here today with close to 100% sunshine. So we'll just go ahead and hang this back in my little tree in the sun. I'll come back later this afternoon. We'll brush, wipe, and or wash the rest of the whitener from the skull. The skull's been hanging up for 4 to 5 hours. Remove the tape on the bottom of the antlers. Then you can just use a dry cloth or a soft bristle brush to rub off the remaining whitener cream. A toothbrush works great for the teeth and also for these little nasal cavities and the eye sockets. Then as you're nearing the end, you can use an air compressor or a water hose to get the remaining whitening residue off of the skull. Then just wipe the skull down. Now I'll blow dry the skull on high heat. Pick off any of the remaining pieces of whitener. Give the skull a good polish with Mop and Glow. This will give a nice seal to the surface of the skull. It'll give it an incredible citrus scent, which sure beats the smell of boiling flesh. And it will help to repel dust, make it easy to wipe off and clean in the future. From here, you can do whatever you want with the skull. You can just hang it like this or mount it on a plaque or some type of stand. I purchased these real cedar plaques on eBay. Just under $21 with free shipping, all the mounting hardware that you're gonna need, and complete mounting instructions. And I couldn't be more happy with the results. Thanks for watching today and for taking part in what is for me a fantastic 2016 hunting season memory. That's how easy it is to do your own European skull mounts. Minimal cost if you're willing to put in 3 or 4 hours of elbow grease, and you're left with a lasting memory. If you haven't subscribed to my videos, please do so. And until next time, this is the Rocky Mountain Meat Hunter saying praise the Lord and pass the venison.